Everyone, thank you for joining. For those who just joined, this is Homeschool 101. Katie Meyer here is going to be going through everything that she's learned with our family as to what we do with homeschooling. There's a lot of folks that are desperately trying to figure out what to do given everything going on in the world. So she put together some wonderful resources to share, to show what she's learned over the years about how we homeschool our family and what we do to do that. So I'm going to hand it over to her, and this is what homeschooling sounds like in the background. So that being said, very helpful. That
Yeah,
is our Rosemary. Rosemary, you really don't need to wash your hands right now, but that's okay. So we're going to go through and we are going to record this. So if you are listening, we are recording this video. We're going to post it online. So anything you say, just so you know, might be captured inside of here. If you don't feel like talking, I'm going to be here monitoring the chat and I can read those questions to Katie and let her know what's going on. So at this point, I think that's about enough for me, and I'm going to hand it over to the real brains of this operation, and she can take it from here.
all right. You can make sure the 3-year-old isn't flooding the house and with her hand washing. It's hard to tell
Yeah.
a kid no, they shouldn't wash their hands during a pandemic, but she's taken them a little too far. Um, so yeah, I just want to talk to people and kind of give an introduction into some of your options and what's available and how to narrow it down because there is so much available. And I'm seeing a lot of people who are brand new and they see one program or it's the first thing they saw or what they heard about or their neighbor uses it or they saw an ad on Facebook for it and they're like, okay, now we have something. And maybe that is the absolute best program for you and for your kids this year, and on the other hand maybe it's not. And you definitely want to take time to sort through at least a few things. You're not going to find something that is absolutely 100% perfect, no regrets, ever and ever. Don't put that kind of pressure on yourself. But at the same time, maybe you do want to look at a few things because the company that maybe spends the most on advertising dollars is not necessarily the one that has the best materials or has the materials that are going to work for your family, because what works for one family is not going to work for another. Um, Personally, I figure I will do a screen share here. I'm going to talk a little bit, just really briefly, about my background in homeschooling, and then we'll get right into some of the options. Ask questions. Um, I'm going to share this Trello board. You'll maybe I'll see things. You'll be able to access it later and go back and look at stuff. You'll be able to, ask me questions later. That's fine. Some of this, just a little bit of it, is going to be specific to Florida. I'm going to real quickly go over how you can find the information on where to register and what you need to do, but most of it's going to be applicable no matter where in the world you are. I think I have a little bit weighted towards elementary age on here because that's what I seem to be seeing people looking for. The high school kids do a little bit better with the virtual schooling and such, where they can do dual enrollment, but the parents with the elementary school kids are kind of like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do with my kid? So that's what I weighted it towards, but there are programs on here for all ages. So I'm going to go ahead and hopefully my host disabled attendee screen sharing.
That guy, can you believe that guy? Let me make you a co-host.
His only job was the technical part.
I know, right? You are now a co-host. You please use your powers responsibly.
Okay, that's unlikely. Look at that. Okay, so hopefully now you guys can see my screen and what you're looking at. People who are in the business world or people who really like organization probably already know it's a Trello board. I'm a little bit new to Trello, um, but it's become very popular in homeschool circles for planning, and that's how I started using it. But it also seemed like a good way to share all this information with everyone, and have it up so anyone can see it. This board is set to public, so when we post the recording of this, you'll be able to click a link and go to it and see it. You can't change anything on it, but you'll be able to see it and share it. So let's see here. I'm also using an unfamiliar mouse. So ooh, don't do that. I don't like this mouse. Okay, so fix that. And I may end up just using mine. Okay, so you can read this later if you want to. I've got 4 kids. The youngest is just turned 3. The oldest just turned 21. We started homeschooling when he was in 5th grade. I actually homeschooled him his preschool year slash kindergarten, and then he went into public school. And then he came out of public school to homeschool in 5th grade. We kept him in all throughout, other than a semester in 9th grade. He did go and get into our local Scholars Academy magnet and tried that for a semester and then decided he was getting good grades, but it wasn't for him. So he came home again. He did do some dual enrollment and did well in those classes. And now I'm homeschooling a rising 5th grader. She'll be in 5th grade this year. We just started our year, and a 2nd grader. And then we have the 3-year-old doing what 3-year-olds do, which is basically, gum up the works. But she's very cute, so that's cool. My own philosophy of homeschooling has morphed a lot. I'm definitely more of a laid back approach in the sense that I don't want the curriculum to be the boss of me and my homeschool. I am the boss, and more than that, the kids are to some extent. Um, my goal for my child is that they have a love of learning. And by that, I mean they're curious about the world. I don't mean they like books or whatever. That'd be great. I'm an author. I like books. Um, but I want them to be curious about the world around them. I want them asking questions. I want them to have a sense of wonder about the world around them, to um, be learning every day and to know how to do that, to know how to find answers to their questions, to keep asking questions, not just accept whatever they see in front of them. So that's my goal. And that doesn't require a particular curriculum or a particular, rigid set of knowledge. So as much as I want them to, yes, be able to read and write and do math and understand the basic of science, um, to know, their history,
Come on.
that's not my
I'll
big
put it in
goal.
my bag. Just put it in my bag. Here.
My big goal is that they
It's
are
good.
the kind of people you'd want to have a lunch date with or dinner with, or the kind of person you want to know. So that's my big goal. So because of that, I may not be the person who can tell you, you have to do this, this, and that. I know about those curriculum choices. I'm going to share them, but that's not necessarily the way I go. Just so you have that kind of disclaimer. That's my personal bias. Everyone's going to have a bias that they bring to it. So mine's a little more learning all the time. The world is our classroom kind of approach. That said, we do use worksheets and stuff too. Things to consider before we start. I highly suggest you come back and print this out later, or sit down with a pen and paper with your significant other, if there is one, if anyone else is going to be involved in homeschooling, and consider some of those basic questions that I was just talking about. What are your goals for your family overall, not just education? What's your goals for your child's life, for who you want them to be? And then what are your goals for their education overall? What are your goals for their education this year or this semester or just the next month? You can't really pick or know what you want to do until you know what the answers to those questions are. And then you also need to, after you know what your goals are, you want to consider, what are my constraints? What are my space constraints? Where do I have to store materials? If I want some crazy math program that has 2 boxes full of manipulatives, do I have a place to put those? Workspace, where are we going to be working at? Are we both going to have to work at the same time? You're working from home and you're going to be having meetings and the kids at the desk with you, versus you have the whole house just spread out. Financial constraints. I've got some free options on here. I have low cost options on here. The library is an incredible source. YouTube, documentaries, but you do have to pay for some stuff, if only pen and paper. So what's your budget? Are you going to be working less hours because you're homeschooling? If so, how does that figure into things? What are your time constraints? Do you have to do a job yourself at certain hours? What hours does that leave left for schooling? How can you plan that out? Is there a time of day that your student does best or that you do best? Are you only going to do Monday through Friday? Are you going to school maybe on the weekends and not school a couple of the weekdays while you're doing your job? Um, are you going to do a traditional school year calendar, or are you going to spread it out over the years so you can do a few less hours a day in order to accommodate that? And what are your human factors? What are people's special needs, any learning disabilities, attention spans, learning styles, special interests? Take advantage of those. If you have a kid who's fascinated by something, use that. What are their strengths? What are their weaknesses? You definitely want to play to both of those, not just one or the other. So sit down and like think about all that first before you start saying, I'm going to use this curriculum. Don't let yourself get boxed in until you know what you want, because again, you're the boss, not the curriculum, not the textbook. So that's my big advice. And then if we look here, I've got, so just the Florida specific stuff. In Florida, you can enroll in a county, as a county homeschooler. You register with the county, you say, I am a homeschool student or homeschool parent, they're a homeschool student, that's who you register. Your other option is an umbrella school. Some other states have that as well. It's just another name for a private school. And what these are is a lot of them, you just go online, you register, you pay maybe a small fee, maybe a large fee. Some of them keep records for you, some of them don't. And when you do that, you are not technically legally a homeschooler in Florida, you are a private school student. So you fall under that category of regulations. That means you don't have to do the end of your portfolio review. You don't have to send in a letter of intent and all that. But you do have to follow private school rules. Like your private school, your umbrella school will require a health certificate from the pediatrician, vaccine records, etc. The other thing to consider is when you're dealing with older students, things like public school sports or dual enrollment or certain scholarships, all that are affected by whether you're a homeschool student or a private school student. So you will want to look into that carefully if you're talking about an older child who might be doing dual enrollment or getting towards graduation, or wanting to participate in sports, which you can do in Florida, even if you're homeschooled. The regulations are on this next card here. Basically, if you're a homeschool student, you send in, well, first you need to unenroll from whatever school they're already registered for. You send in a letter of intent saying you intend to homeschool. You need to send that in no more than 30 days after you start homeschooling. And then a year from that date of that letter, you need to do a portfolio review, a teacher of your choice, and there's plenty out there who do this as a little part-time side gig. Many of them are homeschool parents themselves. We'll look over samples of your work and sign off on a form saying, yes, your child made progress. The technical term is progress commensurate with ability. There's no particular subjects you have to teach. They don't have to take a test or hit a certain level of learning. It is, they were learning the best way for them, and that's what you're going to show. It's very easy. To be honest, I've never heard of anyone not passing their portfolio review. I'm sure it's happened, but it's not a big deal. It's not a stressful thing. I one year showed up with like a newborn on my hip and a plastic grocery bag full of random work samples for the year. And I was just like, listen, I got to get this done. I haven't slept in a week, and it was fine. So don't stress about it, but you can go there and look. I also linked the actual website for the Department of Education. And I have on here as well the county information for my county, Orange County, because you can actually file all that paperwork online. Seminole County is here as well for local people. So that said, I'm going to skip over here. Does anyone have any questions about that before I keep going? Have a sip of coffee. I seem to
If you have any questions, feel free to come off of mute, or if you want to type them, I'm actively monitoring the chat.
Yep. And I think I hid all my stuff, so he'll tell me if people want to chat. But okay, so moving on, I have a list here of what I'm using, which is not necessarily what you should be using. In all honesty, it's not what I've used other years, and it may not be what I use next year. It's what I'm using right now. You use what works, for your situation at the time. You do not need to be locked in. A lot of these curriculum publishers, and more than that, the users of the curriculum tend to form cliques, for lack of a better word. In some cases, almost cult-like. Um, People get very, very pushy about what curriculum they use, and it's the best. It's forever. They're all in. They're buying a lifetime's worth of it for their child because they're never going to use anything else. And 3 months from there, they end up using something else and they fade away. So don't get pushed into that. Use what works for your child now because you cannot plan that far ahead, obviously, right? A lot of us, we're not planning on a pandemic. Things happen. So use what works now. Don't feel that you need to choose now what's going to work 5 years from now. Just don't. You can't. You can't base on that. I am currently using Gather Round, which is a unit style of homeschooling, and I'll show that in a moment. I am using teaching textbooks, 2 different levels for my 2 students. That is an online math program. We were using language lessons for living education as a supplement to the unit studies with more language arts. I haven't decided if I'm getting more of that this year or not, but almost definitely put it there. I'm also looking at Torchlight, which is a literature-based curriculum that's multi-subject, and I'm constantly tempted by exploring nature with children, which we'll get into. I have included some articles here for anyone who wants to do a little more reading. This one's kind of neat, the Guide to Homeschool Methods. As you're looking through curriculum, you're going to find that a lot of them label themselves as Charlotte Mason or classical. Those are the 2 you see the most. You'll hear people say they're unschooling. So it helps to know what those terms are. The big thing to know is classical education is ideally based on the style of education the ancient Greeks had. It is heavy on rote memorization in the early years and then more discussion as you get older and deeper layers of learning. Most of the programs, but not all, use a 4-year history cycle to kind of base all the rest of the study on. And they don't use a lot of textbooks. It's going to be more just regular nonfiction books as opposed to textbooks. It can be a great fit. It can be a terrible fit. Just kind of depends how you do it. And in all honesty, for every classical curriculum you see, they're all going to be different. The terminology is starting to mean very little because everyone wants to slap it on their curriculum. Same thing with Charlotte Mason. Charlotte Mason was an educator in England who was reforming the educational practices. She used short, sweet lessons to keep the kids' interest. Better to do a short lesson well than a lot of work poorly because they're bored or overwhelmed. She believed in what are termed living books, which again just means not a textbook, not a book written by committee, but a book written by someone passionate about the subject. And she believed in a lot of nature study and learning science from a hands-on perspective before going into more abstract concepts. And those are the big ones. Elementary age was, half a day or less, definitely. The idea of field trips came out of Charlotte Mason type schools. You can get really deep into the weeds with what is and isn't Charlotte Mason. There are some excellent books, both written by her and about her. And that label is now being slapped on everything. Everything says Charlotte Mason inspired. And there's textbooks that say they're Charlotte Mason inspired. You can't be a textbook and be Charlotte Mason. They don't go together. Anyway, unschooling. Mm-hmm.
Could you pull up one of the cards and just show the folks what you put in there so that they understand as you're going through this, the additional detail you put in there later so that they can, find these things.
So here on this one, what kind of homeschooler are you? There's a little bit of information here, but the big thing is there's going to be a link here. So you can come down on all of these cards, there will be links and you can click it and it'll take you to the article. So this is an article specifically about the homeschool styles I'm talking about. And she had a really good overview, including pros and cons of the different methods. So she also apparently has a graphic heavy website here. And there's some printables here that go with it. So that's going to be there. When we were talking about the homeschool regulations, if you come over here, you can click on, and then there'll be the link down here for the actual homepage for the Orange County Home Education, the frequently asked questions, etc. So each of these has, if you can navigate right from the board to whatever you need. and explore further. So yeah, so getting back to what kind of homeschooler you are, unschooling was the last one you hear thrown around a lot. It's another one where the term has started to lose any real meaning. Unschooling ideally is child-directed learning. There is no distinction between life and school. They learn things just in the process of everyday life. The parent's job is to facilitate by providing materials, by answering questions, by helping the child find out information, but not by directing what they are supposed to learn. You will hear people say, I'm going to go plan out a year's worth of our unschooling, and that's just not a thing. That's not unschooling. It might be relaxed schooling, etc. It's not unschooling. So there's that. And people will say, well, how do they learn math? Well, if the child decides they want to learn math, they learn. So you can again get very deep into the weeds with unschooling and what it is and isn't. But those are the three big terms that you'll know. I did include a favorite article here. This was a speech given by John Taylor Gatto. He's an award-winning Teacher of the Year from New York State, and he talks about the downsides of mass education. And I know a lot of people right now are mourning what their child isn't going to have this year. They were going to go to school, they had friends, they had this, they had that. So I am not saying that public education is bad or that brick and mortar schools are bad, but if you do need a little kind of pick me up on what are some of the downsides of that you're moving away from or could move away from, this is a good way to do that. I would highly recommend reading this and then considering how it applies to your education program at home. Do you want to have those same kind of things that he's talking about or not? So I've got a few other articles here on philosophy on early education for children. So you're homeschooling now. This one's kind of fun. From Catholic blog. But getting into the actual curriculum, unless anyone has any questions before I start talking about the options and your different ways of approaching this. No. Okay. So I divided this up into programs that have everything for you or almost everything. So some of these will include, there are curriculum packages out there that will include all your subjects or everything but math. It's pretty common to do. Sometimes math is from somewhere else, but they'll have pretty much everything or everything. They'll have lesson plans for the entire year for all your subjects in one place. And a lot of new homeschoolers, that's what they want. They want to have everything laid out for them. And that makes sense, right? The downside of that, really the only downside, is if you have a child who is at different levels in different areas, so they're an amazing reader, but their attention span is below grade level, or they are super smart, but they have a reading disability, or they have dysgraphia and they can't do a lot of writing, but they're great at reading. So you have to kind of look and see if you're going to be able to make it fit for your student, because when you have an entire plan like that, sometimes that's a problem. Some of them let you mix and match different levels of different subjects, and that can address that, or they'll have guidelines that will help you to modify things. So I just throw that out there. So the first one I put up here is called Gather Round. And Gather Round is a pretty new program. It's only been around for about a year. And how did I manage to not put the link for Gather Round? Did I put it over this one? Yes, okay. It's a unit study approach. It is a Christian program. It has only been around, you can see here I put labels on all of these curricula to show you. So this one's an all ages or family style. It's unit study. It's one of my top picks. It's Christian. It lets you do all your subjects, or you can add in more, in a themed unit. So we'll take a look real quick. The way that works is they take a theme such as birds. The first unit we did was North American birds. So yes, it's covering science because you're learning about birds, and you're learning about wetlands, and you're learning about the plants that they eat, and you're learning about migration. But you're also, when you learn about migration, they brought in the link in the words between migration and immigration. and you learned about immigration. You're also learning geography and map skills because you're looking at maps of where they live. You are looking at um, learning about the laws that were passed to protect various endangered species. Um, the biggest thing about this program is you can use it for the whole family. So what we do is we sit down in the morning and I will read to them from the instructor manual. And then they each have a set of worksheets or notebooking pages that go with it at their own level. So there's a pre-reader, early elementary, upper element, early reader, early elementary, upper elementary, middle school, high school. There's different levels, and each one will go a little more in depth. So an older child will be writing. I was hoping they'd have more pictures up here, but this one isn't the one that's up there. So an older child is going to be doing short answers. A younger child might be doing multiple choice or fill in the blank. Older children are going to be researching more information. The younger child is going to base it just on what you just talked about. I love it. Critiques of it are that it's too light in the language arts, but that's kind of depends on what level you're using. It uses copy work and writing assignment for each unit or month-long unit. It also can be kind of just too short or too little, some people say, but the idea is you use it as a framework. And a lot of these, that's how it works. Use it as a framework. So we read the information in the teacher manual, but I don't just hand them some worksheets and walk away. I read the information in the teacher's manual. I talk about it with them. We pull up videos on YouTube. We pull up the Cornell Bird website and look at the migration maps, look at the sighting maps. What's the difference between them? We pull up bird calls. We built a bird feeder. We start learning how to identify them using field guides. The day that we learned about the Migratory Treaty Act, we found videos about that, and then we learned about what are treaties. So you have to kind of flesh it out. And the nice thing about that is if there's a particular part of the lesson each day that they really were into, that's the part you can explore further instead of being constrained to any one thing or any particular material. So if you have a child who's not reading as well, you can use more videos or you can use books that are at their level. So that one's a favorite of mine. There were some issues with typos in the early versions, but they have updated them all, so I believe they should all be fine now. Torchlight. I'm not going to go through every curriculum, by the way. Torchlight is a secular, so that was a Christian one. This is a secular one that is also multi-subject. It is going to cover social studies, literature, art, science, vocabulary, composition. This one has a lot of hands-on crafts. It is from a secular humanist position. The only thing you need to add in is math, and if you have a child who is at the age where they need phonics, you would add that in as well. Older children, you wouldn't need to do that. It's going to teach about history and the world using what we call living books. It's going to use a lot of literature, a lot of read alouds, a lot of hands-on. It has a truly global perspective. And man, is it pretty. So this is one of the ones I linked as I might use. I am incredibly intrigued by this one. I'm going to be looking more into it myself. Again, I like things that are about engaging the student, getting a love of learning, connecting it with real life. So that's where this one fits in. They have several levels now. I think they're up to level 5, and they continue to add. These levels are not grades. So several different grades could use the same level because you're using living books. It's not like a particular piece of poetry is for a specific grade level only. And if you're a year older than that, that poem has no meaning anymore. They do include in the levels extension activities so that if you have a younger and an older one doing it, if you get the one geared towards the younger one, there will be additional books and activities for the older one to go with it. And you can see how pretty it is. It comes as a PDF of the lesson plans for the whole year. There are links, so you can, a lot of people use it on an iPad or other kind of digital device so they can click on it and show the links as they're working through it each day, and then you get the books yourself that they use. So I'll show you real quick the kindergarten level.
Katie, while you're pulling that up, you had a question. Could you just, for a split second, explain the difference between Christian and secular? Especially, I think the nature of the question is how the curriculums would be different, but Christian versus secular and how they would be different.
Absolutely. So, and it's going to depend on the curriculum, but for my purposes, I labeled it Christian if there are going to be Christian beliefs or scripture from a Christian perspective included in the curriculum. So it doesn't necessarily mean that's the perspective of the owner. There could be secular Christian curriculum put out by a person who is Christian, but it will impact it. And so if you're not looking for that, if you don't want Bible verses as part of your child's handwriting, or if you don't want God mentioned in the reasons for certain things, you're not going to want Christian. Some secular families do use Christian programs and just kind of move past it. I have one child who is more of an agnostic, and we did use a Christian program for some of his high school materials just because at the time that was the best that was around, and he'd just kind of roll his eyes or make snarky answers, if they asked questions about that. There are a lot more secular ones out there now. I will say that there is some wiggle room, an argument around some of the science programs. I have labeled the ones that claim to be secular as secular. There's at least one in there that just skips over the topic of evolution, age of the earth, etc. And for that reason, some people would call it neutral, not secular. But I did note that in the notes on any of the cards. That would be no-eo science. And there's a few more like that out there. So that's something to keep in mind. And then there are other publications that are, a science textbook that's going to teach creationism, or a literal 7-day creation is going to be very different than one that talks about evolution. So you're going to want to keep that in mind. That's really the big part of it. So Torchlight, not going to include a biblical perspective. It will teach about religion in the context of culture. And there's a few others. You can see here, you would download for the kindergarten when it's like $30. You get a PDF. It's going to have the games and links and scheduled readings, etc. on it. And then you would get your own books that go with it. And you can check those out. So I'm going to close that. Close that one as well. So that is Torchlight. So again, that is a literature-based curriculum. So you're going to be reading a lot to your child. That can get time intensive. I highly suggest looking into audiobooks for some of that with a lot of these literature-based programs. And that is a phrase you'll hear a lot, literature-based. So those are going to be ones that have a lot of historical fiction included with their history readings, actual books, a lot of reading aloud, a lot of the student reading. And let's see here. So some others, My Father's World. And again, these are all labeled. If you click on them, you can see what these labels mean. That's a Christian one that's been around for a really long time. That one does come from a young earth perspective. Sunlight is a Christian one that is literature-based again. It is known for using a lot of historical fiction. It has a lot of books. If I would have been homeschooled, it is the one that I would have wanted to be homeschooled using because I love books. I tried it therefore with my children, and it turns out they don't like books as much as I do. And that's not what they want to do all day, every day. They want more hands-on, more multimedia, more crafts, etc. And so that's not going to work for my family, unfortunately. I do know people who use it and love it. It has been around quite a long time, and certainly any child who is educated with it is going to have an excellent education. They're going to learn a ton. And this is one where you can get just the package that has history with Bible and literature, or you can get a full grade program that has language arts in it. It has math, it has science, or you can get things piecemeal. So any of these ones that are full programs, most of them you can go ahead and get piecemeal as well. So I'll click on this world history one so you can kind of see. I'll usually give you a picture here of what's included. So you get a big box in the mail that has all this stuff plus the teacher guides, all sorts of books. And that's just the history and literature one. That does not include all the science and everything. They have science kits, that come with everything you need for your experiments. They have videos of the experiments in case yours doesn't work out so well and you need to show the kid what it was supposed to do. Um, it is not cheap, and it's not cheap because they have so many books and because they've been around a long time, and they have these complete lesson plans day by day by day by day. You just check it off and go. People who use it say it's worth it, but it's not cheap. Bookshark is the secular version of Sunlight. They're owned by the same people, the same company. I think maybe it's like one family member went one way and one went the other. It's basically the same programs, but with the religion taken out. So you won't have books, telling you how to live a biblical life or whatnot. And they also have science, math, etc. All the options there laid out very similar. Comes from a conservative position politically, which comes across in the instructor notes, but not really anything else. Another really great couple of these are Layers of Learning and Build Your Library. Layers of Learning, I'm not going to click on it right now, but Layers of Learning is a guide that you get, a PDF, I think maybe you can get print, but mostly PDF, and then you just add to it. And it, again, covers literature. It's going to cover science, and geography and art. So this one's a neat one, and that it also includes art appreciation. So you'll study about a time period and you'll learn about the art of that region. You'll do some geography and map work. You'll learn about the history. They have a writer's workshop option, so you can add on your language arts, and then all you would need is math. So it does take, however, a ton of planning, and it's very teacher intensive. So that one's not going to be like, do this, this, and this, and you're all done. It comes with a bunch of options. You have to sort through them. Some others are Build Your Library. This one's very much like Sunlight, but from a secular point of view. It is going to be literature-based, and they approach language arts from a Charlotte Mason perspective, which means that instead of worksheets on grammar, you're going to study a passage and look at it and analyze the grammar. Why was it written this way? You're going to copy it. You're going to memorize it. You're going to learn to spell by spelling the words that are in it. So it's a different approach to language arts. And again, lots of living books. It is a bit more affordable than Sunlight because you don't buy your books from them. You get them wherever you can get them. The library, Amazon, used bookstores online, etc. It's just the lesson plans. And a neat thing about Build Your Library is it comes with what they call narration cards. So narration is usually just your child telling you back about what they just learned. So instead of a fill in the blank worksheet, a lot of these programs will instead have your child either write or discuss orally what they learned about. They'll tell you what they remember, and that's how you judge how well they're learning. And this one has these narration cards where there's different options. So it might be tell someone about what you learned. It might be create a poster about what you learned, or act out a scene from the book you just read, things like that. So there's lots of different options for different kinds of learners. And I think that's a really neat thing about that program. You can also buy their narration cards with those suggestions to use with any other program. Moving beyond the page is one that's been around a long time. I have not used it, so I'm not going to go into detail. It was designed for gifted learners. It is incredibly expensive, and I have never figured out exactly why. And it says it's for gifted learners, and it has a lot of really neat big ideas like learning about interdependence in the ecosystem and change versus chaos or something. But the actual activities are pretty much, they're not very flexible. It's worksheets a lot of the time. There are some hands-on things too, but a lot of it's worksheets, and I don't think it lives up to the hype, I'll be honest. But there are people who like it. So I did include it on there, and it is a secular program, and there's not a lot. These down here are going to be
before you go too much further, I want to give you a time check. You've got about 15 minutes till the end of the hour. And we have a few questions as well.
Okay.
So I think
those were the big ones I wanted to do the grade level on. So yeah, that's good. Perfect.
Okay. So I can't remember if you had a thing on platforms, but one of the questions we received was, do you have any opinions on what Osceola County is going to be using for their online schooling? Specifically, they're going to be using a platform called K12, and I went and look that up. It's K12.com. Have you heard of that? Are you familiar with it? And do you have any
Yes.
opinions?
Yes, if they're using it, K12 is, I'm assuming they're using the virtual program. It's an online school, and they often contract out with school districts. It's an incredible program. It's actually a really good program. I'm less familiar with the very early, like kindergartenish levels, but I hear really good things about the upper elementary and middle school level. Those are supposed to be actually really fantastic, and a lot of homeschoolers pay for those classes, not through a school district, and they're expensive. Or a lot of homeschoolers use their social studies textbooks in particular. Their middle school history texts are some of the best out there. So, yes, I hear good things about K-12. Um,
Have you heard anything about how much involvement the parents have to have? You've talked before about parents who maybe are now working from home and have to balance this. Is this something that might work for them?
it's textbook based, is my understanding, or at least it was the last I heard about it. That could have changed. I don't hear as much about it anymore because there's just so many other options. It used to be one of the only online school options. At the time, anyway, it was textbook based. So the student, if they're doing it through the school system, I would assume the school system is going to be the ones grading it and doing the assignments and whatnot. So it'd be more like checking in to make sure that they're getting their work done and maybe answering questions and such. Beyond that, I could not say. So,
Well, and you have one more question. It's a little bit maybe potentially off topic, but what is Plannyway? I think you have a plugin
yeah,
there.
yeah, it's a plugin. It lets you put things. It's for scheduling. It lets you put things on a calendar easily, and you can divide up your screen so it'll show the calendar at the top. Which I'm gonna click on it and hope I can make it go back away again. Um, I don't need the template right now. So it's just a Trello plugin that lets you sync with calendars that you already have, and then you can actually put link cards to dates. I use it for my writing. I'm an author, and so when I'm trying to keep track of timelines, which I'm really, really, really bad at, my editors hate it. I've started using it so that I can put the scenes of the book and tag them to different dates and then see where things are happening so that I don't end up with a character having a pregnancy that lasts 2 months and she has a full-term baby, which happened in my last book. So that's all I've used it for. I'm sure it has more functionality than that. And I think I can get rid of it now. Yay. Okay. I only ever use it for one of my boards.
Cool. And that was all the questions we have now. So
Okay. If we have any Catholic people, I do have in the same multi-subject full plans program for people who want, again, the entire school experience. There are some here that are Catholic that have that, or Christian. These are all Catholic or Christian. Some of these, Mother of Divine Grace School, Seton Study School, those two actually have schools, which is why they're called that. They've been around a long time. You can actually enroll your child in a distance accredited program, and they will assist you with planning, grading, everything. Now, that means you lack flexibility to some extent. You're doing what they say, but for some people, that's what they want. Seton is much more workbook. It's all workbook. It's all workbook oriented. Mother of Divine Grace is going to be a little bit more broad. Catholic Heritage Curriculum, that's another Catholic one that has every subject lesson plans. They will give you a lesson plan for the entire year. You just plug and play. Christian Light Education is a neat company. It's a Mennonite company. This is one of the more budget-friendly options out there. And their materials were made for one-room schoolhouses. So they were designed to have a teacher who doesn't have a lot of time because they're trying to handle 12 grades at once. So the kids needed to be very independent. So if you need independence, Christian Light Education, it's very workbooky, but it is a very solid education. It's very rigorous, and it is very independent. The materials are written to the child once they're able to read, and they need not a lot of help from you. So I do recommend that one if you don't have a lot of time. Another one for people who just don't have a lot of time, Easy Peasy Homeschool. This one's also budget friendly in that it's free. It is 100% free. It isn't something I've used. The critiques I hear of it is that it's kind of dry and bare bones. You'd want to flesh it out with documentaries, extra reading, library books, discussions, that kind of thing when you do have time. But for getting the basics down, it will do language arts, science, religion, social studies, etc., spelling, and the kid just clicks through lesson, 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 and it will just walk them through it. And it used to be they had to write all their answers on notebook paper, but you can now buy workbooks that go with the lesson. So they'll be on the computer. It is a computer-based program. They will be looking at the computer. It will ask them a question. They'll have a worksheet to fill in, but it will talk them through it day by day, and you can, check on what they did and everything. And it's, again, 100% free. It is Christian, but I don't know how much that impacts, say, their math. Probably not at all. It also, I will say that they're very early grades. It uses whole language and sight words more than I like, rather than a full phonics program. So that part, beware. More you press.
You have another question. I'm going to take somebody off mute they wanted to ask.
Yep.
So,
Yeah,
I believe it's
hi.
Alina. Go ahead.
Yeah, this is Alina. Hi. Thank you so much for putting time aside from your day to do this. I really appreciate it. And everything you've gone over has been helpful.
Good.
My question is this. I have kids back to back. So I have a preschooler and a kindergartner. And
Okay.
I've been homeschooling them with my own kind of curriculum since March, because that's when everything shut down in our area.
Yeah.
And so I am getting, I've put my question out to homeschoolers. I put it out on on social media, and half the people say, do not buy a curriculum. And the other ones are like, you need to buy a curriculum. So at this point, I'm like, they're in preschool and kindergarten. And the stuff we've been doing has been some worksheets I pull off Google, a lot of arts and crafts, phonics, letter sounds, math with like manipulatives,
Yeah.
using mulch to do math,
You've got
stuff
it.
like that.
You've
And
got
also, yeah, we read a lot, like two hours a day, probably. Not like all at the same time, but
Right.
we just love books. So I just, I like piggyback on that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, so
That's
I
what
have been looking at the easy peasy.
Mhm.
And I agree. It's like mostly computer work, and my kids are not computer literate. They don't have tablets. But I was like getting some ideas from them
Mhm.
for that. And I was just like wondering if that's something I could be doing, like just making kind of my own curriculum with what I see them respond to.
Certainly.
Just because they're so young.
Yeah. There's nothing a kindergartner needs to know that you don't know. So
yeah, I hope not.
So here's my thing. I actually have a section over here on preschool, and some of it applies to. So here you go. This section is all going to be for the preschool part, and some of it will also be useful for kindergarten.
Mhm.
I don't believe in preschool for the most part. I think preschoolers learn everything they need to learn from everyday interaction with their parents or family members or whomever they're around, siblings.
Yeah.
You point out
yeah.
colors to them. When you pick up an orange, you're like, oh, look, it's orange. Oh, look, the sky is blue. You don't need worksheets for that.
Okay.
You don't need worksheets for reading to them like you're doing. The number one predictor of child success in education is reading to your child. You can find tons of evidence about that. So you're already doing the big thing. So the preschooler, don't let it stress you. If look up fun crafts like you're doing, talk about things, just point things out. That's what you do. If you do want some worksheets for like letter sounds or rhyming, and these go up through third grade, so they work for your kindergartner as well. I really like these. They're Fairy Poppins is the name of the store. It's on Teachers Pay Teachers. They're very affordable. They're printable worksheets that cover things like phonics, short vowels, long vowels, digraphs, etc. So you can kind of work your way through these, and they're very fun. And again, they're very affordable. They're a couple bucks for a thing. So you can get like an alphabet center. You can do rhyming worksheets, and she'll label them with what grade levels they're for.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of these similar types. I think the company is School Zone at the Dollar Tree.
Yeah, so you can find, and I like Fairy Poppins one because a lot of phonics workbooks, in my opinion, the pictures are hard to figure out. So it's like, what letters does this start with? And I'll show a picture. I'm like, I can't tell what that's a picture of, you know?
Yeah, I've seen that.
So
Yeah,
very
I've seen
often don't
that.
seem to do that, which, you know, that gets my money. Um,
Okay.
and then with the
But-
kindergartner, yeah, you're going to be learning to read and some basic math. And then nature, books, discussion, um, that kind of thing. So yeah, you don't need a full curriculum. I would say at some point you do need to be, you know, making sure we're not missing any phonics. Um, that's it. My favorite phonics program is this one, ABCdarian, and it
Okay.
is one that is actually research based. It is the only program out there that is based on the brain science. How does the brain learn to read? It is fantastic. It is fairly budget friendly. It is incredibly easy to teach. It's just laid out, you know, this lesson, then that lesson, you open and go, do a page a day or whatnot. They have videos on the website to show you how to teach it if you want more help. And the owner will even do Skype tutoring if you need it. He'll answer questions via email. He's fantastic. So if you were
Okay.
looking for just a phonics program to make sure you're not missing anything, that would be
Mhm.
my suggestion.
Okay. And just quick question, where are you going to putting these like resources after this
Gonna I
session?
will send out to everyone, I think I can do that, tech guy, a link to this board so you can
Okay.
see it. And then there's a section over here about all the different math options as well.
Mhm.
Some of these don't have kindergarten level Christian light education because kindergarten kids basically are learning their numbers. Okay. Mathematical reasoning does.
Yeah, my kid already he already knows all that. I
Yeah.
mean,
So
they're
mathematical.
I mean, I think they're very very smart kids. Every mother thinks oh their kids are very smart. But I also noticed something that the Seminole County public school system is using, and that is they are testing them upon getting them within the first 30 days to see if they know the alphabet, to see if they know the sounds that go with each letter, and then numbers 1 through 100. Like they actually sit there and evaluate during the first 30 days of receiving the child. So I was like wondering if that's something I really need to strictly stick to.
No, no. And in when you go, if they go back into public school, that
Hmm.
is done in the elementary levels, it's going to be done by grade in age. It's just you're this age, you're going to go into that grade. So you don't need to worry about that. It's not like they're going to placement test them. Those testing they're talking about is so that they know, the teachers know where the student is at, so they know how to instruct them for the year. Because in kindergarten, you have kids who don't know their letters yet, and you have kids who are completely reading. And so you need to figure
Yeah.
out who's who, because at that level, they make these jumps fast. So you're trying to find out where everyone is so you know what level of instruction they need. That's all. So that's
Perfect.
not
Wow.
like a
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Thank you.
You're
So
welcome.
we have about 2 minutes left, and I think in the last couple minutes here, and I know you and I maybe can stay on a little bit longer for that. We got a couple questions.
Okay.
That's a good idea, Adrian. I just saw your message. So to answer the one question, in the chat session right now, I've already linked to the Trello board. I did that earlier so that people could see that if they couldn't see it well on the screen. Could you go through just real quick the other columns and what they might
Yes.
find in there?
Yes.
And then we'll stick on and answer some of these other questions. And if anyone else has other questions, we can do
Yeah.
that.
Okay. So we talked about what I'm using, the education articles. These were the plans. And keep in mind that when I say they're multi-subject plans, if you get to social studies, I put a little note here. All these ones over here that are in the full plans, they have social studies too. So I didn't list them twice because that seems silly. So we have social studies programs here. These are going to incorporate history, geography, government in some cases, etc. But again, those are all covered in this too, so you don't need to add both. And when you're looking for social studies, you can always look at one of these full programs and just get the social studies part in some of them. Some of them it's more interwoven, but those are options. And again, they're going to be labeled if they are teacher intensive versus independent versus budget friendly, Christian, secular, etc. And then I'll have on each one a little review of, you know, my thoughts on it as well. We have reading and phonics. I start out with my secret to getting kids to sit still for read alouds. Some articles that go over what's needed for a kid to learn to read. What is the actual science behind that? Phonics programs. And then a section of early readers. Alina, you've got little kids. Check out these early readers. These beginner box sets are my absolute favorite in the entire world. So check those out. And then there's some other ones as well, but these ones are just adorable. The beginner books box sets. Language arts. Some of these are going to be all in one, which is what the ones under that tab there that include your spelling, your grammar, your composition, possibly handwriting. Others, I'm going to be filling that back in. I don't have all those spelling ones in yet. I will. Grammar, some handwriting information, math, some articles about math and types of programs so you kind of can know what you're evaluating, and then some different math options here. There's ones that are online and completely independent, and ones like The Good and Beautiful that are very teacher intensive and manipulative heavy. So you have a couple different options there. Science, articles about the goal of science education, and then some different curriculum options. I have, again, both secular and Christian perspective. This exploring nature with children is really interesting to me for young children. I'm going to be looking more at that myself, but there's some other options there. A couple religion options for people who are looking for that, non-denominational as well as Catholic. Some arts, I'm going to be adding more to this board as time goes on here, but I've got a couple art programs here that are great. Preschool, some resources here, more for you than the student. Some forums where you can ask questions in Facebook groups, local and otherwise, books that I recommend about homeschooling and home education, podcasts, videos, some apps. If you don't have this library extension app for your browser, get it. Every time you go to, say, Amazon or Goodreads, it will tell you if your library has the book. Epic is another one. It is an online resource for ebooks for children, and it is fantastic. And I give a review and description of it there. And then I have some stuff about scheduling and logistics. So different kinds of scheduling, how to organize all the paper, some examples of what I've used, Trello for homeschool, OneNote for homeschool. So you have some different options there. So I will still be filling this in a little bit. Again, I didn't get into the nitty gritty with some of the spelling, and I'd like to add some more art options, but there's definitely a lot to look out here. So you can either, again, look at a full program, or you can piece it together, picking and choosing for different subjects and, from different companies.
Great, that's awesome. So we're right at the top of the hour. I want to be cognizant of everybody's time, and we'll kind of maybe stop this here, and we can always, if you're willing, we can always do more later. But at this point, what we'll do is if anyone has any questions, or Katie, if there's anything that you wanted to cover, that'll take us right to about the hour, and we can go through some of the questions that were in the chat, or go through other questions that people have. So while we're waiting for people to formulate questions, a question came through regarding how do I know what to teach a first grader if I'm only doing homeschool for a year? So you and I have talked about this quite a bit. Often there's guidance from the federal, state, local, et cetera, that says these are the kind of things. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yes. So you're talking about states for grade level standards, state standards. They have different names. I actually just found out recently that Teachers Pay Teachers, the website I showed the Fairy Poppins thing on, you can go there, and if you search for your state and grade level and standards or state standards, you can actually find what they're supposed to know for that state, what the public schools will be doing, and you can find it in regular English instead of complicated educationalese. You can also go to your county Department of Education or State Board of Education and usually find a list there, but it's going to be written out in about 15 pages more than it needs to be and incredibly complicated. The other thing to keep in mind is the math programs, which is the biggest thing, and reading. Those are going to be pretty much all aligned. So if you find a math program from one of the major companies, it's going to teach your child what they need to do. I wouldn't go get like Joe Schmo's math book that you found at a garage sale, from 19, 12, and you don't even know what level it is. But if you're getting one of the major companies, it's going to have them fine for the next year, as long as they're able to understand it and work through it. The other thing for first grader is going to be phonics, reading. So you want to make sure their phonics are really strong. And a ABC Darien, like I said, that was my number one choice for that. There's a few others as well that are good listed here. So making sure that they have really strong phonemic awareness, they can code words well, they're becoming fluent with reading. That's where your focus, math and reading. Make sure, as long as there's no handwriting difficulties, just making sure that they can write a sentence or two by the end of the year. And you can look up what your particular school, or even contact the school that they'll be going into and ask them, what do they need to know for first grade? What are you looking for? But as far as social studies and science and all the rest of it, every school does it a little bit differently. That's not where their focus is in those grades. So there's no it's not like they're going to not be able to get into second grade because they learned about the ancient Greeks instead of learning about the pilgrims or something. As long as they're learning, it doesn't really matter. But again, you can contact the school specifically if you know what school they'll be going to and ask if they can give you guidance on that. But as long as you're getting a solid phonics program in and a standard math program, you're going to be fine.
So we have another question here. We focused a lot on, because a lot of people are trying to figure out what to do with preschoolers, with kindergartners, etc. What would you suggest for teenagers at the high school? And we have some folks that have, two teenagers and are
Yeah.
wondering, how do they adapt?
Okay. I My first step is you talk to the teenagers because man, they've got to be stressed out right now, right? They're going through a lot with this pandemic. If they've been pulled out of school all of a sudden, and their world is in chaos. And I mean, I know mine is, and they don't have the same coping skills. So I'd sit down with them first. Where are they at from a mental health perspective? Because we're seeing a lot of kids who are having a really hard time. So I'm tearing up. That's my first focus. Academics is second. And they need to know that. They need to know that you care about them more than the school. Then you're going to find out what their goals are. Do they want to go back to the public school system as soon as it opens? Are they, getting close to graduation? What are their goals? And then you work backwards from there as to how to meet that. If they're, you find out if they're going back into a public high school, will the high school accept homeschool credits? Do you need to instead be looking at dual enrollment? Is that a possibility in your area so that it gets accepted that way? You'd be surprised, a lot of dual enrollment programs, people think they have to be a junior or a senior, but in Florida, the law is anyone older than sixth grade can take a dual enrollment class at a community college. So that's one option. And those are mostly online at this point, but would provide a lot of support. Some of these multi-subject full plans do have high school programs. Sunlight does, My Father's World does, Bookshark, I don't know that Bookshark does. So you can look at some of these. The Catholic programs definitely do some of them. Memoria Press does. You can also look, some of these here are going to be your history and literature in one, Biblioplan, Tapestry of Grace, Not Grass. This one's more of a textbook type approach, but it also uses literature. So that's an option. There are also outsourcing classes to, I don't have that on here, but I can add that in over the next couple days, as far as things like online courses that they can take that are not through a particular school and are designed for homeschoolers, but give some outside support. There's also plenty of math options in case you're freaking out that you're going to have to teach calculus or something. Teaching textbooks goes up through geometry at least. And then there's some other options as well for outsourced math where they can actually have a teacher who will help them through the course, using a real textbook, some video lessons, tutoring, etc.
Awesome. That's a really good point about the dual enrollment. If that's an option in your state, that's amazing because they're getting college credit in that's applying to high school as well. So I don't see any other questions in the chat. If there's anyone else who'd like to throw a question in the chat or come off mute and ask a question, if not, this is all being recorded right now, and I'll edit some of the early banter out and put it up on YouTube a little bit later. So if you joined late or didn't get a chance to ask the question you wanted to ask, you want to go back and review the video, that'll be there. Does anyone have any other additional questions? You can put them in the chat or you can come off mute. Not seeing anything. So
Okay.
Katie, thank you for doing this. Thank you for putting it all together. I know I've gotten a lot of questions from friends and you have as well. So thank you for that. Like I said, she's the brains of this here operation. I will send out the Trello link through Zoom through all the registrations, but I did put it in the chat for the people that are here. We'll also edit it into the YouTube video and the comments and whatnot, so we'll put it in there as well. You know, thank you for your time. Katie, do you have anything you want to leave everybody with?
No, feel free to contact me later. I'm sure you guys can do that somehow. I'll let you know how. If you have other questions or if people want to do this again and cover you know, maybe organizational or outsourcing classes, that kind of thing, I'm happy to do that as well. You know, or if people want to talk about a specific subject or something like that to go more in depth, that's definitely an option. Otherwise, feel free just to kind of crawl through all this and click on all the different links and find out, you know, take a look at the different options, take notes, etc. As far as that goes. And I may go through and try and actually add some labels at some point that show which ones have high school programs, because that's a good point. I didn't do that. So, and some of these are for younger kids. Easy Peasy has high school, etc. So there definitely are some in here. So I think that's it. Again, let me know if you have other questions or if you'd like to do another meetup with a more specific topic. I'm happy to do that. Otherwise,
we'll figure out which contact info you want to use, and I'll put it in the follow-up email to the registrants.
Okay. Well, thank you, everyone, and don't panic. Try and get excited, and figure out, you know, what you want from this year and what your student wants, and try and look at it as an opportunity. So
we already got one comment, but another one on organizing, specifically on organizing, logistics, and not losing your mind would be great. We absolutely can't help on the last one.
Yeah, I was gonna say I got the first two.
first two we probably could. So
yeah,
maybe that's an idea.
I can definitely do that and show more of how I do it. For now, I would say start with these links over here. There's some great information, and both on organizing your year and organizing paper, organizing digitally, etc. And see if that doesn't help. But be flexible. Just be flexible. So there's a lot of interruptions in the classroom too. So keep in mind when like your 3-year-old's interrupting or you're getting a work meeting or something, that in the classroom there were interruptions all the time too. There's some kids throwing a wad of paper, or someone else is puking in the hallway. I mean, they get interruptions everywhere. It's good to learn to deal with them. So it's a life skill, right?
All right. Well, thank you again, Katie. Thank you everyone for joining. We'll get the video up, and everyone have a good weekend.
All right. Thanks.